Hello, I'm Jan English Lewick. This YouTube video series profiles workplace anthropologists whose work directly influence their own workplace processes. The video series is part of a workshop in the Business Anthropology Matters initiative. As people increasingly spend their waking hours at workplaces, anthropologists need to understand those experiences. The practitioners profiled here have used anthropological skills to access, document, analyze, and relate the lives of workers and the businesses that employ them. Organizations employ anthropologists to understand a variety of worker-related issues within organizations, ranging from design to strategy. These interviews explore the practical, theoretical, and ethical issues that must be resolved to do workplace anthropology.
My background in anthropological training is a pretty formal academic training. I have a PhD from the London School of Economics in social and cognitive anthropology. And I also completed a undergraduate and master's degree at the London School of Economics as well. Even before I started my PhD, I was working for a small consulting agency applying anthropological methods and theories to help solve problems in the business world, government, and nonprofit sectors. My anthropological training in an academic sense was really quite separate from the work that I do in industry. Right now, I picked a really classical topic to study. My thesis is about kinship in a small village in Peru. So not directly relevant to the kind of work I do now, but I think you'll find that a lot of anthropologists, think more about how that way of thinking and the methods that we learn are useful outside of academic anthropology. So I am, my official job title is Principal User Experience Researcher. I work for a very large tech company. Core product is an HR software, and that we have a lot of products and applications around that. We have a fairly large design organization within this company. And so a lot of my responsibilities are mentoring junior researchers, ensuring some standardization and a certain level of quality across the board in terms of the research that we conduct, and really helping junior and mid-level researchers grow their own careers, explore other types of doing research. A lot of that is opening opportunities to do more ethnographic work. And then I do more strategic work with other teams like product management and engineering, sales, customer support, and help define a vision for products for the company. People don't necessarily perceive me as the anthropologist. Not that I think they would have a concept of what that is. I think that the influence of that training and that way of thinking is definitely more of a covert thing than an overt thing. How did the people I work with perceive me, or what sort of a background did they see? What value did they see me bringing? I think people mostly see me as a research expert. I do bring a slightly unusual research expertise to the table that I think someone with an anthropological training can bring. So in my case, one of the things that I think an anthropological training really one of the ways that anthropology has a distinctive impact on the work that I do is a much broader, holistic perspective on the problems that we're trying to solve. So I work as part of a design or user experience team. Often the focus is, what can we do on here that works? on the small screen. I was doing this kind of research before this field was really called user experience, and I was doing a lot of research that looked not just at how does someone access a website or a software program or an app on their phone, but what are all the things that are happening outside? How does their social environment, how do their relationships influence, the problems that they're experiencing, and finding opportunities within that to come up with new solutions, as we say, or new services where the digital could be part of that, but it's not necessarily the ultimate goal to produce something that can fit onto a screen or on a website. And there is a name for something like that. Service design is a term that is sometimes used to talk about the broader experience of a user. The behind the scenes business processes that also need to change in order to enable that. And that kind of a focus is much broader than someone who maybe only has experience doing UX research in a more narrow way. The product that we're building is maybe biased towards certain cultural and workplace practices and work cultures that maybe we're not catering as well to a large Japanese organization. And so a lot of what I'm doing is bringing an awareness of that into my work and helping other researchers think about these problems and what does it mean to do, how do you do research on this product in a different situation, in a different cultural context or in a different country, how do you do it across language barriers, and how do we build something that works not just in the US, but works in other places as well. Sometimes coming in as an outsider, which I think anthropologists are in a great place to position themselves as, even if we're the in-house anthropologists, keeping that outsider perspective can really help, bring a fresh perspective and create some conversations that maybe previously weren't possible. What really worked was telling some really rich stories from users and from customers themselves, and painting a more human picture of what they were experiencing. So both together and discovering the human side of that started a conversation that I know has had a tremendous. So success for me, it comes a lot from the one-on-one conversations that I have, the water cooler moments, or since I work in a tech company, the snack wall moments, when people are reflecting back on, maybe they sat in on a user interview and some anecdote, left a huge impression on them. When people are still talking about research months or even years later, I know that we've been successful to some degree. I think one of the great things about technology these days, it's not perfect, but I can take people along on a session, whether they're sitting in Dublin or Paris or San Francisco, and provide them an opportunity to see things firsthand. When I first started out, we used to write 100-page reports. Nobody reads those anymore. I think these days, something that I encourage other researchers to do is bring people along as early and as soon as possible in your research. The value of bringing people along and having a sense of ownership in the research and really getting to the human side of things is tremendous. I've had clients who were in tears when we presented research findings to them. We often find that more when we're doing government work or nonprofit work, but I think when you can really create that empathy and create that connection, I think that's where the biggest success is. And then for me, also success is opening up new opportunities for other researchers, particularly ethnographic uh, research, or, sometimes we call it contextual inquiry. So, it's still sort of a structured interview, but taking people into the field, into people's homes, or into people's workplace. A lot of junior researchers haven't really had that kind of an experience. And I think, everyone walks away from it transformed in some way. So how do I stay in touch with the discipline? By going to events like the Triple A's, reconnecting with old colleagues. Um, there are a couple of resources, groups, that I like to dip in and out of. Being the only anthropologist can be a lonely experience, so it's really important to have peers to talk to frankly and openly, and also be inspired by. So there are a couple of resources that I can talk about in more depth later. It's definitely something that is very important to me. I still dabble with university teaching. Even when I was a PhD student, I always had a foot in both worlds, in academia and in industry, and that's really important to me. That's important to my own sense of identity, and who I am, to have that connection and to have that network. I still try to write in peer-reviewed journals. I still, as I said, try to go to conferences as well. I try to keep up to date with what my friends and colleagues who have stayed in academia are doing. I think I've noticed a big shift. I feel like 10 years ago, when I was a consultant and doing my PhD, there wasn't a lot of interest in the work that I was doing outside of academia from my academic colleagues, and there wasn't as much momentum around finding a crossover and building these bridges. There weren't a whole bunch of applied anthropology classes that you could take if you wanted to learn about this stuff. And I've really noticed a big shift. And there are organizations like EPIC and this initiative from the Triple A's that are really doing some interesting work trying to connect that fabric a bit more. I think it's really, really important. I had the opportunity to teach a design anthropology class at Colorado State University, in which I had complete freedom to teach my students about something else that they could do with this kind of a background and this kind of training. I think it's really important to keep those lines of communication open, and I know it definitely keeps me. I feel more accountable to some of my more academic training by keeping those connections alive and keeping those things going. I have to say, it's not always it's a labor of love. It's something that I think is important for future generations of anthropologists exploring what things they might want to do with their training, and yeah, it's incredibly important to me.